It's November 19th, 2020, and you're listening to Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable.
Remember, this is what we said. To never be heard, seen from again. Remember, this is what we wanted. Remember, this is what we said. To never be heard, seen from again.
Even with the fade. All right. Well done. All right. Thank you to Mr. Crushinator himself, Pat Fahey, for that one. Welcome, everyone. This is the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable. I am your host, Chris Quinn, coming to you yet again, not from Studio B of the Co-Prosperity Sphere in the community of the future, Bridgeport, Chicago, but from my house with my crummy Mac view screen. Sometimes I have my external camera, but you guys don't even get that today. You just get a grainy me. And I still want to thank Lumpen Radio for having us. And I want to thank everyone at Lumpen Radio, the fearless leaders there. I want to thank producer Serge in Exile, everybody. And thank you guys for tuning in again in this revamped, rebooted Insiders Roundtable. For those of you new to the show, this is a chance where we get to bring people in from the beer industry, sit them around a Zoom table. It's never been an actual round table, if we're going to be real about it. These people know. But now it's even less real. But it's still, the heart of it is here. We got people who have made beer a part of their life coming together and talking about the beer industry. With that, I will mention that everyone's opinions are still their own, even if they're in the comfort of their own home, and not the opinions of Lumpen Radio or any other entity that these people may or may not be affiliated with. With that, then, I will get to introducing my guests. I introduce them in order of seniority, that being how many times they've been on the show.
Oh, thank God. I thought it was going to be age.
No, so you have to shut up for a little bit, Donn, because Mr. Pat Fahey, the Crushinator himself, the master crusherone, I should say.
I was going to say, you're like dropping a new nickname.
Yeah, from his Crush Palace there, his Fortress of Crushitude. How are you, Pat? What's up?
Oh, I'm hanging out. I felt it was only appropriate if I only drink beers that are beers that I would like to crush. So I'm starting with Allagash White and then moving on to, it's of the season.
Have you had it yet this year?
So when I was at Beer Temple, whenever that was, I think it was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, you stopped in. You wanted to do a little photo shoot. It was right before we opened.
Yeah. So, and then stayed for 8 hours. Hey, can I stop by and take some pictures before you open?
Sure. He did stop by before we opened. And then when I went home for the night, he was still there taking pictures. So.
I had more pictures to take than I thought. Anyways, I grabbed a 6-pack then.
They were nudes for his dating profile.
Yeah, we were doing some tasteful nudes on the bar at Beer Temple. May they never see the light of day.
Yeah. But anyway,
so I picked up a 6-pack of Celebration when I was over there, and we don't buy a lot of beer by the 6-pack because, actually I shouldn't say that. These days, we just buy things that we will drink by the 6-pack, but we went through it in a couple days. And so I was at Whole Foods earlier this week, and I was like, yeah, we need some more Celebration. Mm-hmm. It's one of the few seasonal beers that that I truly feel compelled to buy every year because it's just such a beautiful beer. So
It's great. It's so out of, in a way, it's so timeless yet out of style with what everything else is being made. It's
for
very
a winter
aggressive.
for
It's
a winter
very
seasonal.
aggressive. Yeah,
It's a fresh hop IPA. Like
right, but it's actually malty. It's a malty bitter IPA. I mean, those are two things that if you put that on the label of an IPA, I mean, it's guaranteed not to sell.
this is what IPA tasted like.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is what IPA tasted like when I started drinking beer. And I mean, this kind of IPA will always have a special place in my heart. There are not a lot of people that still make them like this. I think of like Bell's Two Hearted is another one that's sort of in a similar-ish vein, at least for me. And like, that's a beer that I absolutely love. I'm glad that people buy it because that means it will continue to exist. So
yeah. What's new with you, Pat, other than drinking Allagash White and Celebration Ale?
I feel like when in the past when I was on the show, every time you'd be like, "So, where have you been recently?" and have like, "Oh, well, I was doing like I haven't been anywhere for a long time." So certainly no exciting travels, but
That's not true. You were like hiking all over the place, weren't you? Camping.
That is true, actually. So we, I guess I shouldn't say that. So in COVID times, I haven't done any work travel since March. But yeah, Avery and I just did like a road trip through much of the Western U.S. and camped all over the place. We put in about 5,500 miles over 2 weeks. So
AKA haven't traveled at all.
Haven't gone anywhere. Haven't done anything.
No.
Ridiculous.
It was a month ago, which in 2020 time, that's like a decade. So
right.
I barely remember that trip at this point.
Okay.
But in terms of things that are going on, I want to say even though this was happening some of the last couple times I was on the show, I don't think I ever mentioned it, was that I was working on a book. So started working on a book for Brewers Publications, which is the publishing arm of the Brewers Association 2 years ago now was when
Is that really how long it's been? Wow.
That's when I got tapped to write it. It is a technical book for breweries on how to build a sensory program. And it's focused especially at small to mid-sized breweries. I, earlier this week, got the first layout for review that's due at the end of the month, and then I'm fully done with it. And I could not be more excited to finally be putting that project to rest. It's been thrilling to work on, but oh my God,
But you got to go on the press junket now. That's what starts.
COVID probably killed the press junket, so I won't worry about that too much.
Okay.
If anything, I know the main spots where they have Brewers Publication authors do things are usually in conjunction with events that I would already be at, things like Craft Brewers Conference or GABF. So
got it.
So yeah.
Okay. Well, cool. Congratulations, man. Cheers to you.
Thank you. I appreciate
it. Clang. And my other guest, the junior member of the panel, is Mr. Donn Bixel. What's up with you, man? How are you?
I just love, for the first time in a long time, besides the fact that I am a junior, being referred to as the junior member. It's kind of nice to be.
Yeah,
junior to me, no less. I think
this is fantastic to be this young next to Pat. I mean, I at least wanted to start off by saying that all my opinions are only Pat Fahey's. So.
It's true.
Yeah, they're not your own. They're all your own, I guess.
No, kind of like Pat and I were talking before we started. Not traveling's been a little weird. A number of family trips. We've been up to Wisconsin a number of times and did a big little couple-week road trip up into Wisconsin and up into Minnesota earlier back in July. Saw some family and some friends, but as far as work travel, my last trip was the end of February. I mean, it's very weird to be off this road and kind of see all the events that kind of usually would be happening, in the springtime, and right now, either happening remotely and not hopping on an airplane and getting to see all of you in person. I've been lucky enough, Chris, to see you a couple of times stopping by the shop, but besides that, you know what I mean? I had a big conversation today with a couple of people here in Chicago about what I'm going to do.
Call them out by name. You know you want to. You know you're dying to.
I'm not going to call them out by name.
You're like.
I don't know.
Like,
I anonymous people in the beer industry that I talked to today asking
high level people, famous people. I was talking
very low level people that own bars that make bacon and ones that own bars in Andersonville, asking their opinion on what I'm to do about the annual kind of beer party this year, and opinions on that it's sneaking up fast, and so it's been a little bit interesting transitioning into these times of living a lot more in my basement and spending a lot more time on Zoom just like this. But as far as work, kind of the same. I think the last time we checked in, and it's been a year. LinkedIn told me actually yesterday that it's been a year since I started my company.
Jesus,
it's pretty amazing how quickly that year kind of went by. And so we've been working.
Been like the shortest and like the longest year ever somehow.
It's been such a great year, Pat, because of the fact that I've gotten to concentrate on things that I probably normally wouldn't.
That's
you both were able to see my daughter kind of sneak in before this started, and spending more time with them has been awesome. But yeah, I can't believe it's been a year. It's been a year since, I kind of moved into starting this thing. So our company is now touching almost 50 suppliers across the United States, across beer, wine, and spirits. An awful lot of data management, things like that, and consulting for a few of them. But it's been kind of cathartic during this time to be able to touch so many different suppliers, but it's all been virtual. I mean, I can't wait for this thing to get to a point where we can travel again, because I'm going to go on the Pat Fahey road trip and go and visit every single one of them. I mean, it'll be the first thing that I do once we can travel again.
Well, cheers to you. Congrats on that. It's good to hear.
Good to see you both.
Yeah, you were talking about events and what to do. I think I've all but decided, we were talking at the shop, we're going to do, I think, an outdoor event in like late January or maybe February, just in the bitter cold. They do one in Wisconsin that I happened to stumble upon called Bachfest at Capitol. I think I just walked into it randomly 10 years ago. And it was amazing. It was like people all like bundled up. They were wearing like Snuggies on the outside. And they had like a band. And it was just kind of craziness. So I was like, might be a good year for doing that. Just like going out in the middle of the cold and just everyone being like ridiculously bundled up and just drinking beer. I think we
back when I lived in Minnesota, there was a group that put on a few festivals called Beer Dabbler. And they still do festivals. They have a publication that they put out now, but they had like the summer festival and then they had the winter dabbler, and it was outside in Minnesota in like the middle of January. And they have like fire pits going, but like otherwise everybody just gets like crazy bundled up. I remember like having to like help somebody because their jockey box like froze solid. Like just stupid, but so much fun. So awesome. If you're thinking of doing that, highly encourage it. It's just like, people get bundled up and drink and
stupid
commiserate fun. over the how brutally cold it is, and it's a good time.
Yeah, many years ago I actually have been trying to put together an event like that for years. We almost had the guys down at Tiny on the River, that Tiny Lounge on the River, to do it. The city just wasn't real keen to the idea, and we couldn't figure out how to make money if it was just a couple of days. But in Michigan, they do the same thing at one of the minor league ballparks. They do this winter beer festival.
Oh, yeah.
And that's kind of the first time I ever saw it. I was over there for a crew drive with some brewery. I don't remember how many years ago. And they had the big barrels with, just full of, the fire and stuff, and everybody's sitting around it with the big coats. And I've always thought that here in Chicago, it would be great. You just got to find the venue to do it. And it's tough to make any money, obviously. So it's got to be one of those things that's more for the love of the beer than than making any kind of financial profit. But yeah, I hope you can do it. I hope you can do it and pull it up. Maybe that'll be the location of the gathering of beer people this year.
Yeah, I mean, we're just going to do it in our parking lot, so it's going to be fine. But I know at Capitol they did some weird stuff. They would like throw cured fish off the roof and stuff. And people would try to like catch it in their mugs. So I'm definitely going to do that and just like get up on the roof and throw fish off of it. So
Wisconsin.
Yeah,
you should get one of those giant, the
t-shirt cannons.
The cannons that shoot off, t-shirts, but just shoot off, dead fish.
Yeah, that's a great idea. If we ever get around to doing the craft beer awards again, I had two stipulations for me doing it again. Is one, we needed to rent a helicopter, which we had in place, and two is we needed a t-shirt cannon, and we were going to launch hundreds of shirts to the point where it became so not funny anymore, and people were just like, after every award, like 10 t-shirts just get fired off into it. But hopefully, just for that reason alone, we'll bring that back. What's everyone been drinking lately? I mean, in fact, Pat, you kind of already went ahead and talked about Celebration and Allagash White. Anything else?
So I drink a few things these days, and like it's fair amount of Avery's beer. So Keeping Together beer, which is a treat and a pleasure. Also,
if you look off camera, I see you.
I saw that too. I saw the glances.
I saw that.
How do you hear that plug? It was a good plug.
I mean, the beer is good, and she's brewing it over at Half Acre, so we have plenty of Half Acre stuff in the house too. If we didn't have just like a constant supply of Fader coming in, then Donn, I might go the banquet route, but I don't have to because we just have.
Yeah.
Fader fills that role for me. So a lot of that, and then otherwise, we just did yesterday our last session at Cicerone. We started in the spring doing this tasting together thing where we do like usually a different beer style every week, and I'd talk about it and do it on YouTube. And so a lot of times that would result in me buying a 6-pack of whatever that style was. So moving through a lot of different styles that way. But otherwise, I think that we've seen, or the numbers bear out that we've seen a lot of this, of people kind of reverting more to like flagship brands or tried and true beers during this period. And I feel like I already was kind of there, just because a lot of those tried and true brands are brands that I really, really love. But I've definitely leaned into that during this time. And yeah, Allagash White is a perennial in the fridge. Celebration recently. I actually picked up like my first 6-pack of Great Lakes Christmas Ale for like the first time in like 4 or 5 years.
Yeah,
and
I was saying I think I'm going to try that for the first time in a couple of years too. Yeah.
It's there are so few occasions where I want like a spiced beer that's like that. On the occasions that I do, that beer is perfect. I mean,
it's like
it
a
is
gingerbread cookie kind of, right? If I remember.
It totally, when I first tried it, I remember thinking that it tasted like Cinnamon Toast Crunch cereal. It's not subtle in its spicing, but at the same time, it's not necessarily overbearing. It's for that kind of beer. I think it's perfect.
Okay.
So like I said, like there are very few times when I'm like, yeah, I want a heavily spiced Christmas beer. but when I do, like once every 4 or 5 years, I'm like, I'll buy a 6-pack of that beer.
All
so
right.
I've had a couple of those over the last few weeks and like really enjoyed the hell out of them. So
we just got that. Yeah, I just got that in recently. I was saying to myself, I wanted to try that, which it's been a couple of years since I've said that. It just reminded me, we haven't talked since on this show about the Pilsner contest at all. And that was in the summer. Yeah, well, the show went on a really long hiatus because
Fair.
Lumpin shut down. The studio is. And without someone to literally make me go there and then push record for me and say, start talking now, and then send me the file afterwards, what you get is a 6-month hiatus. But yeah, so I don't know if you know about this, Don. Do you know about the Pilsner contest we did?
I don't actually.
Okay. So
I barely know about it. I
Yeah.
participated.
Yeah, and Avery. And Fader was in it, which is what made me think about it. So we put out a call and said that we want to find the perfect Pilsner. So we didn't call it the best Pilsner, but it was the perfect Pilsner. And then that was very much open to interpretation, you know. And we did not solicit any breweries and just said, send us your Pilsner. We're going to blind taste it. We're going to, and then just decide, narrow it down to a group of finalists, and then do blind tastings that are open to the public.
That sounds like solicitation, by the way.
No. So we didn't directly solicit any breweries, I should say. We made an announcement that we're doing it. Okay. We didn't email anybody.
Gotcha.
We did like a social media post about it is all we did.
Yep.
And we got, and the rules were, we got 40 Pilsners from all over the country.
That's awesome.
Internationally. And internationally people sent it too. And, it had to be a year-round beer, and it needed to be labeled or marketed as a Pilsner, and we were a little bit wiggly with it because Fader kind of wasn't, but it used to be, and we said, well, why aren't you doing Pony? Because you have a Pils, but whatever. They wanted to do, Half-Acre wanted to do Fader. And it was cool. We had Pat and Avery and myself. Very hard to run a blind tasting with like the quarantine kind of going on. It was difficult, but I think we achieved it, Pat. Right? And
it was a good time.
Yeah,
we had a lot of fun doing it for sure.
Yeah.
Which beer won this?
So the finalists, you got to build this. You got to build it. So the finalists, I think there were 8.
This group of judges, which was like some of your employees, the two of us, a couple other folks, we narrowed the pool of 40 down to a pool of 8. Basically, the top 8 beers that we picked out of the whole group, and those were.
It was Firestone Walker Pivo, which was in the first round far and away number 1. Nothing was even close to it. Rothaus Pils, which got in on a tiebreaker because what was it? Bell's Third Coast, is that what it's called? Just barely didn't get in.
Was it Lager of the Lakes?
Lager of the Lakes. I think
Third Coast is an old ale.
Yeah, it is. Well, there's 2 versions of Third Coast. Whatever.
Yeah, I can never.
So anyway, Lager of the Lakes didn't get in. So it was Pivo, Rothaus, Mama's Yellow Pils, which has been reformulated and is really nice. Wiseacre Tiny Bomb. There was Weisstefan Pils. There was Pipeworks Pils, Trumer Pils, and Pulaski Pils from Maplewood. Those are the 8, I believe. And from that, we
Can I at least guess when it's time for the guess? Because I don't know anything about this festival, but I think I now know the answer just because of the fact that a couple of people have given me, I think, this beer that I'm not going to say anymore. So when it comes time, can I at least guess?
Guess right now.
It was the rot one, the
Rothaus Pils. Did not win. A lot of people thought that it was going to win, and it
was not it.
It didn't win. No,
God, I had 2 people in the beer community out of the blue give me that beer this summer and tell me that I had to try this beer. It was the best
mind blowing.
I've ever had.
Right. Yeah.
People talk about it as like the best Pilsner ever, and it is a very nice Pilsner. And I would imagine too, like, especially if you had it like really, really fresh, it would probably be even better. But it didn't change my life. I think it's a nice Pilsner.
I had two people.
And somebody will
give me that
probably
beer.
kill me for saying
I had two people give me that beer as if it was going to. I enjoyed it. I really did enjoy it, and maybe it was a little bit of the hype, and I enjoyed it both times. But two well-known people in the beer community gave me that and said I had to try this. And I enjoyed it. I like free beer.
It's amazing, Donn. I'm amazed. There's twice now that you said two or a couple well-known people in the beer community, and you haven't said who they were. Kudos to you. I think you've turned over a new leaf, Donn.
I'm not going to do it.
It's just no big deal. I don't care.
I am not giving you I am not giving you the satisfaction of you
That's
knowing
really what
many
it
more
is.
people in this business than me. I'm just not going to do it.
So the Rothaus Pils thing was crazy. I think the Beer Temple played a part in kind of kicking that off, because it was over probably for the first 6 months of the year, it was our number one moving SKU. It was our number one seller. We were taking in, so like 100 cases would come into Lakeshore. We would take 95 of them and blow through it in 2 weeks.
Oh my God.
And it's like a $14.99 6-pack of a imported Pilsner. So yeah, we moved like hundreds and hundreds of cases of that. People were buying it by the case. Yeah. Oh yeah. Moving? We buy it by the stack. Now we don't buy 100 cases. I mean, we bought 70 cases at a time, but now we do more like 10 cases. We'll do 10 case drops, and we don't do that really of anything other than like Hop Butcher or something like that. So yeah, no, the winner was I think the surprise of the contest was for a lot of people, not for everyone. There were some people calling for this beer before the contest even began, but Wiseacre Tiny Bomb. Really, that came in second, I think, or third, something like that. Trumer Pils won.
Huh. Does not surprise me. I mean, it's such a. When I left the shop 2 weeks ago, Avery was like, "I need like a crispy, delicious Pilsner," and I was like, "Oh man, what do I want to go with?" And some Trumer 12 packs had just come in that day. You know. That's in the fridge too. Maybe I should have one of those next.
You can certainly crush it. Yeah.
It's Trumer is definitely a favorite of mine. It's such a good beer.
It is.
Yeah. I still have two of the Rothaus left in the fridge out in the garage. I do not have any. I don't think I've had that beer. I can't even tell you. Maybe 10 years since I've had one of those beers.
We had we had some ramen last night and crushed a few Trumers alongside it because it's the closest thing we had to Japanese lager here. So.
Well, I think you hit it before though, Pat. As far as freshness, you know, I mean, I started my beer career out working for Pilsner Urquell, and I'll never forget the first time I actually got the chance to go over there and drink the beer and realize that it's not the same beer. It's like it's the same thing with whatever Rothaus would taste like fresh. You know, at Trumer, how fresh is the beer that makes it into the States? Like, how old is that beer?
Now,
well, they make it in California, don't they?
Nowadays, yeah.
Yeah, is that where it is?
It's California, but it used to be really, really beat up by the time it would get to Chicago. But they've, I think, recommitted. Somebody along the line has recommitted to it, and we're getting regular drops of fresh beer, and we're getting the cans again finally. So hopefully,
I've never seen that.
Yeah, hopefully we can keep that going. What are you drinking, Donn?
Mm-hmm. I started out this summer, this spring. Geez, it seems like summer. So I've been drinking with the same crew of people for about 10 years, and we drink together. And Chris, you know these people. It's like you've seen us together every Thursday.
Garrett Oliver, Sam Calgione.
For the last 10 years, and we drink the same beer generally. We get together and we drink. You know, generally it starts out with Jungle Boogie. We've been drinking Jungle Boogie for years, and then once COVID hit and we couldn't, sit inside anymore, we started hanging out with at Metropolitan. So Metropolitan became like go-to drinking their lagers, and it was Zwickel, Zwickel, Zwickel. And that was all through the spring. And then we moved over to start drinking at the Montrose Saloon. And oh my gosh, I'm going to forget the name of the brewery. The great lager brewery here in Chicago that's over in
Dovetail.
We started drinking a lot of Dovetail. And then the one beer that we've moved into as the weather's changed, and I haven't moved into winter beers yet, we've been drinking the shit out of Tome. Tome has become like my new, like, kind of go-to kind of winter beer. And, when I'm with the neighbors, I was telling Pat earlier too, it's like we drink, Modelo and Coors Banquet. I mean, that's what we drink here in the neighborhood. It's inexpensive and it's plentiful. But at the places we've been getting together still and drinking outside, it's moved into, as the fall is, into Tome. And I had heard the hype beforehand and had never had one up until about 2 months ago. That is an absolutely spectacular beer. So lagers all spring and through the summer, and then it's moved into Tome. And now I'm drinking an IPA from, I told you guys before, from this brewery I had never heard of, this Fort George Brewery, which is a 25,000 barrel brewery out of Oregon. And I got sent a little gift pack from these fine folks, and kind of a collection of different IPAs and a couple of stouts. And these beers are great. They're fantastic. They had a wet hop beer that was really good. It doesn't hurt the fact that this beer actually that I'm looking at was brewed on 930. So it's nice and fresh from Oregon. And I don't think it's available here. I think it's only out in the West Coast.
Okay.
Does that count as a name drop if it's like, this is a brewery you can't get here?
That counts.
He very much wants it to count, so we'll count it.
It would only count if I had like said the brewmaster's name and that we had like had drinks together at some obscure bar that Chris Quinn had never been to.
And never would. Not because I didn't want to, but because I can't.
It's like a third of a name drop.
Right. We'll give him a third on the counter. He gets a
not doing it. Just not going to do it. I broke the record last time. This time I'm going for 0.
Okay. All right. There you go. We'll see. I love it. I do want to see how many times you're like tempted to, but then hold it back. I was with some very, very well-known, very well-respected people. Trust me. That's very Trumpian in the way you do it that way. But we'll move on. But there, High West. Very nice. That's the double rye. Good stuff. So why don't we'll take, I guess we don't need to take a moment. We're all just here anyway, but we can just move right into it. Donn, you want to start out with the latest Nielsen data and what it's been saying?
Yeah, it's been interesting subject to talk about too. I'm on a text
tee it up if you wouldn't mind, so people know what we're talking about.
Yeah, you know what I mean. Just kind of talking a little bit about the latest articles that have come out, talking a little bit about kind of the slowing trends across the industry. I mean, I think all of us really felt early on for a moment in the spring that, we're saved, you know what I mean? We all have to stay home, but the numbers are through the roof. People are up 40, 50%. It's incredible. We're all going to be, we're going to be saved by all these at-home drinkers, but it's slowing. I mean, it's not dramatic slowing, but to watch it. And the interesting thing about numbers is, as you guys know, that IRI and Nielsen's primarily broken out into 52, 26, 13, 4 weeks and down to week increments. But if you look back 26 weeks, I mean, that's almost about the start of this thing. You know what I mean? From where it, kind of really started to kind of, really kind of die out. And, so when you start looking at it, there was a high across the industry of high 20s to almost low 30s as far as increases. And that has dramatically pared itself down. I mean, I pulled some numbers just to kind of look at it. I mean, spirits hit a high mark of up 28%, back 26 weeks ago, and has kind of fallen down in the last 4 weeks to 21% up. So 28, 24, 21% up. At wine made it up as high at about 25%, 26%. Has fallen down to the trends right now of about 17% up over the last 4 weeks. And beer is the one that's really interesting. Is beer hit a high water mark of about 20 and has fallen down and held. It's held for the last 13 and the last 4. but it's holding at about up 4%, 14%. But this thing that really is kind of, scary about those numbers that the beer community needs to be concerned about is the fact that those numbers are being lifted up so strongly by the RTD category. I mean, with you strip that out of there and pull that completely out, beer itself is only trending right now up about 6 or 7 points. So that's not going to make up for it.
Is that 14%? Does that include seltzer?
It does. Yeah, it does.
Wow.
So it's everything malt. So that's, and Pat, I just pulled up the latest numbers too. I mean, it's up 14 week ending 2 weeks ago. So this is end of October numbers. And then you strip that seltzer RTD stuff out of there, anything that's malt based, and it's really about 7.6, 7.7% is all it's up.
And one thing that I think is really important for people listening, Nielsen numbers cover the off-premise.
Yeah, very important to say that.
Yeah. So this is not beer generally. This is specifically beer being bought in grocery store, convenience store, liquor store, not beer being purchased in bars. And so that's one of the things is that larger breweries have seen, offsets in terms of more beer being purchased in the off-premise, and obviously significantly less beer being purchased in the on-premise. So these numbers, the story is very different from brewery to brewery, depending upon how much of their business was in the on-premise versus the off-premise. And I think that's an important thing for people to understand who don't necessarily live and breathe with Nielsen stuff.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and Pat, so well said too. And and probably we should have prefaced it with that. And I was asked by one of our clients down in Texas, and they're an RTD company, and they're actually spirit based with theirs, and they make a version of a ranch water. And their question, and I reached out to a bunch of industry folks across, like some people at AB, people at Miller, people at Nielsen, and people at IRI, to answer this question, because I had never really been asked it this way before. And they asked how much of the overall category of sales in the off-premise were being captured by these numbers that we throw out there. And it was very interesting to hear the different numbers, because, and I can't speak directly to which company told me what, but I will tell you this, that the largest of the large companies told me anywhere from 70 to 80% of their off-premise business is captured here. The scan companies wouldn't go on record and say exactly what the numbers were, but let's just say that they said something very similar, like right around that 70% number for the off-premise channel is being captured.
And just very quickly, what you mean by that for people out there who may not know is, there are other avenues for selling beer off-premise that are not part of the Nielsen IRI scan data. So essentially, the person's asking, okay, how much of the actual off-premise industry is being captured with this data? Is what you're talking about. Sorry to interrupt. Go on.
No, it's perfectly. And what they were referring to is any of the independent stores, people that wouldn't be a banner store like a Kroger or a Jewel Osco for those of you here in Chicago. And Binny's is a creature in its own, because it doesn't necessarily share data at the kind of micro level, but do so kind of at the macro level. So the mom and pop stores that you go and support, they're not capturing this data. So as you went further down, Pat, exactly what you were saying, as you get down into the breweries, and I can't even imagine if you wanted to take a look at like real strong up and coming breweries like Hop Butcher, which is such a great example. Hop Butcher's numbers may look so impressive in scan data, they don't even begin to tell the story of what they're really doing because of the amount of business that's not even being captured at all. So I couldn't give these people a straight answer. I told them the best way we could look at it was to look at their overall depletions out into the market, what they were selling, and then get a good look at what was being captured as being pulled through the IRI or Nielsen scan data. And for them, a company that's doing about 10,000 barrels worth of RTDs, they were capturing about 50% in the state of Texas. So for a 10,000 barrel brewery in the state of Texas, where they do a fair amount of their business and a lot of the C channel and some of the alternative, places to sell, they were still capturing 50% of their overall data. So, but yeah, great point, Pat, and great clarification, Chris.
And it's hard. I mean, I know for someone, just the little guys like Cop Butcher, it might not be. So there's two things. Is it being captured, and what is the actual implications of these shutdowns and what's going on right now? And I know for people like Cop Butcher, it's eerily not affected them at all.
Yeah, at all.
Just like, there's, I would not have known other than it being all around me. But just from a business standpoint, it hasn't affected them at all. And then you've got people like, like the bigger craft players in the market, I'm sure are being affected drastically. I'm sure Half Acre is being affected drastically by this.
Well, and some of them, because of their maturity in the market, are showing numbers that, the numbers really are very hard to understand right now, because, Chris, exactly to your point, some of the ones that aren't as mature in the market or weren't as mature in chain are suddenly finding that that's their only real avenue to be able to sell a lot of volume. So they're showing phenomenal growth, where some of the larger players like the Goose Islands of the world and the Revolutions of the world that already had mature penetration into the chains aren't showing as much growth in those channels from the scan data, but it's not really showing a real true picture of how everybody's really doing right now. Mm-hmm. It's almost like that expression in the industry of a pipeline fill. Once you start selling beer into the market, you're going to sell so much just to fill that pipeline of opportunity into all the retail locations. There's a big pipeline fill that's happening right now across the country of brands that weren't traditionally in chain rushing into those channels so that they're able to get sell-through. So the numbers, though we get so deeply engrossed in reading them and what they mean, the weird thing about it is right now, even the best of the best at the Brewers Association, you look at these numbers, and the best of the best at Nielsen and IRI, they do let us know that these are numbers that aren't truly telling the full story yet. And it'll be interesting once it shakes out come spring, once we see kind of the cycling of these numbers, what the story really tells them.
Yeah, and I feel like in the past too. I mean, I don't know how much this is true. Like, back to that point on premise versus off premise. The on premise is notoriously difficult to capture good numbers on, just because, in the off premise you have large grocery chains or large, liquor chains that sell tons and tons of beverage. You don't have that it's not easy to track data in the on-premise, but like for people who, I would imagine that in the past, if a brand was blowing up in the off-premise, it probably was also seeing a similar trajectory in the on-premise, or at least there was some relation there. And right now, the on-premise is just dead. So,
and very unreliable, even when it was back on, completely unreliable. Yeah.
So for for people out there that don't work at breweries, the margins are a lot better in the on-premise than they are in the off-premise for breweries. So for any brewery that was very reliant on the on-premise, even if they've seen huge volume or dollar gains from like a Nielsen perspective, they may be down significantly as a business.
Well, if you look at, you started out so well with talking about Allagash. You know what I mean? All of us on this program today are all friends with the folks at Allagash, and
some more than others.
Yeah, Chris. You talk to that person every single day, but it's very interesting because you had a business, and I don't know if they were 70-30 when this all started. 70% of their business on and off.
Huge on premise.
Their timing was so amazing. I mean, you got to hand it to them, and they obviously didn't see this coming, but it was in their pipeline, moving into cans and moving into 12 packs, and they rolled those suckers out right where this was hitting, and their business has just been explosive. I mean, they haven't fully made up that gap, but they're really friggin' close. And then you see breweries like Fiddlehead, such a great example out of the Northeast. Fiddlehead was doing almost no business at all in the on-premise, none. almost no package. And they quickly were able to transition and start flooding the marketplace with, all of their products. But those breweries that were sitting at 70, 80, 90%, the non-mature breweries, ones that couldn't get cans or couldn't get packaging and couldn't find a route to market, those
Anybody
breweries,
without
they're in trouble.
Anybody without a distributor who relied on their own taproom sales, like
That's what I was going to say. Own premise. Yeesh.
Yeah. It
yeah,
just went away. It just went away overnight.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. Is because I have lots of friends that work in smaller size breweries where they did a lot of their volume through own premise sales, and I remember talking to people outside of the industry. They're like, well, they're still able to do like takeaway and all that stuff, and it's like you can't charge the same amount for a growler of beer as you can for somebody sitting for a pint in your bar. Like their margins just went through the floor. And like,
people aren't going to do that. People aren't going to show up to get a growler and leave. I can't tell you why they're not going to do it, or I can tell you why, but
they did early on, though, Chris. Yeah, sorry to
interrupt,
did it. Chris.
They did it out of charity. They did it out of charity.
Completely. Yes.
But even still, the margins on a growler are not the margins on a pint of beer. Like you can charge $6-7 for a pint of beer. Nobody is out there charging $30 for like a growler of IPA.
Yeah, right. and I don't want to call it and I don't want to call it charity, Chris. But you and I talked about this. I went and stood in line, at our friend's bar, and we stood there, and the line was spectacular, and it lasted like 3 or 4 days. It was 3 blocks long, and we all sat there and we waited, and I bought 3 growlers of beer, of which, and I hate to say this, one of them I just poured out actually the other day that had sat in my fridge that I'd kind of forgotten about out in the garage. And I hate to say the word charity, but you're right. A lot of us, because I don't like.
We were all scared. We were scared for these businesses.
Beer that way, and I don't like drinking beer that way. I don't think it tastes great. I don't think it's the best way to present it. But I went like everybody else did, and we went to those establishments and we bought that beer and we tipped exorbitantly because of the fact that we were all scared. We wanted to make sure our friends made it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not sustainable, Pat. Back to your point. And there's no friggin' profitability. It was just almost like save the kegs. It was like we were going not to save the children. We were going to go save the beer that was locked in those kegs. We had to save it.
Yeah, something that people probably don't even think about is how the industry was also. There was just this huge glut of beer in kegs that once it's kegged, you can't get it out of a keg except through a draft handle, and then it became weird because now there are no kegs. When stuff opened back up, nobody was doing kegs because they were all scared. So, even I was saying before, Pat, how all the on-premise numbers are so unreliable. We have 21 draft lines. We have 20 and a cask. When we reopened, we had 8, and we're like, I'm just doing 8. Our menu was full, but the rest was just bottles and cans and glasses of wine and stuff like that. Because I was like, we're just it just isn't real. Some people are here. We're very spaced out, but this is not real. It was the on-premise game was so weird.
It was so strange, Chris.
Our busiest time was the afternoon. It was so weird. Like
I sat in that room several times. It was. And I went there before this happened. So us going to your establishment wasn't charity. It was our normal place. We wanted it to feel like it felt before, but all of us felt like, somebody knew that we would see and that we knew in the industry would walk in and you'd be like, hey, it's great to see you. And you'd go with a glass and you'd go, yeah, I'm going to sit over here. Good. It's good. Hi. Yeah, But the amount of that beer, to what you were saying, though, about it going out, think about the amount of beer that also went back to some of these places and got canned. That's the crazy thing, is the fact that I don't think a lot of people realize that a lot of that beer got recollected by breweries, and a lot of breweries then took that beer and then canned it off.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't realize that either.
Yeah, there was a lot of that beer that got crowlered and canned. Actually, the amount of conversations I had with breweries that did that was quite fascinating to watch.
Big guys, little guys, both, or
not big, and
no one worth naming. Really,
nobody worth naming. But I would say that anybody below a 20,000 barrel brewery, and those breweries that somewhere between about 2 and 10,000 barrels, there was a lot of it going on, much more than I think
that makes more
realize.
sense.
Yeah, there was a ton of it that happened. I don't think people realize that it happened. There was a lot of it.
Yeah.
I didn't.
But those breweries were scared too. They couldn't eat. Like the big guys were out there saying, we will give you 60% credit on that keg to the distributors. We'll give you 70% was the next one. And it became an arms race. And it started out at 50-50, and then it went to 60, and then Sierra was like 70.
Why?
Because they wanted to appease their distributor partners, because they see the long game of this. And the long game of it is making your distributors happy. So a lot of them had the power to be able to go out there and give these big credits.
They had the cash to do it.
Be able to do it. And the small guys, that crushed them. They couldn't go out there, and thankfully the distributors didn't make them give them 70% credits, but the small guys couldn't afford to give that money back. That money was keeping the lights on back at the breweries.
Barely.
Yeah, barely is right, Pat.
So what, Donn, do you think that the latest Nielsen numbers and the trend that I saw some headlines about was that even within the overall downtrend, beer is especially down, which you had kind of hinted at a little bit before. How do you think that bodes for beer overall? Is this just a COVID thing, or is this, a continuation of some trends that have been going on for a little while?
I think to exactly finish on what you said, I think it's a continuation of trends that have been going on for a while. But once again, don't fall too in love with the numbers, because we also have got a situation in which a lot of the big breweries can't maintain stock. I mean, the amount of time that I go into Costco and pick up my phone and give crap to my largest distributor here in Chicago because of the fact that they're out of my Modelo Flats, or they're out of Lagunitas or something else that I was going to purchase. And they tell me, they're like, we can't even keep like Miller Lite in stock. So a lot of the big guys aren't showing numbers right now because they're out of stock. I mean, the out of stock situation is something that we're not even talking about.
Why is that?
No cans. They have no cans. Everybody's running out of cans, so they don't even have it. That's why you start seeing odd things in Costco. Now, I'm not saying that this is the only reason why Three Floyds was suddenly in Costco, but I do know that across the country, there's other breweries that are showing up in Costco in non-case packs. I mean, the ability to buy a 4-pack in a Costco has happened, and a 6-pack in a Costco has happened, because of the fact that they're not able to get the traditional beers in flats that they're able to sell or in cases. So, yes, the numbers are bad, but the numbers aren't telling the true story, once again, of the fact that there was a dramatic shift in this country over the last 10 years from bottles to cans, and that right now there is pressure on the system for people that are buying cans. It's like toilet paper and paper towels. There's pressure on the system. I can't even imagine if you were a paper towel manufacturer looking at the numbers going, oh my God, the doom and gloom in our industry. Well, there's no doom and gloom. You're seeing massive spikes and then out of stocks. And that's why also when you look at the numbers, that suddenly traditionally products that you would see at 7-Eleven or Julatsco aren't there as the number 1s and 2s, and odd brands, small craft brands are suddenly in the top 5 or 6. It's got nothing to do with them suddenly becoming popular. It's got everything to do with the fact that there's nothing else to buy.
You can actually buy them.
You can actually buy them, but you're also purchasing them because there's nothing else to buy. Everything else is out of stock. So I don't think I really answered your question, but I would say that it's twofold. I think that beer has definitely been in trouble for years. I mean, beer has definitely been sliding down for years. We took the consumer away from buying large packages of beer and turn them into picking ponies at the horse races, grabbing 4-packs and 6-packs of everything. I think what's happened now is a massive switch back to, and Pat said it perfectly, back to traditional flagship beers and traditional large pack sizes. And I think that's here to stay. And I do think, and I will say this, that this is probably to the benefit of beer in the long term, because I personally buy a lot more beer here at home than I did before and share it. It's more macro beer and so forth, buying it in more volume. I think in the long term, it might come off this bounce and it might be better for beer in the long term. But right now, beer is losing out still, as it has been for 10 years, to wine and spirits.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Why don't we take a couple-minute break, take a bathroom break, and then come back and talk more about, well, I guess beer, probably. And then
Probably.
I will say, Donn, while we're on break, I'll let you know when we go back on. So you are technically allowed to drop as many names as you want. And I have to relieve myself one way. You have to relieve yourself another way, I'm sure. So you can do that. And then we'll be back with more of the Insiders Roundtable.
Sounds
All right.
good. See you, boys.
Cool.
See you in a bit.
See ya. Okay, so let's get it going.
Yep.
I'll go like this. So when
You
I'm
play music?
going forward,
Do
no,
you
I
do music
don't.
again?
But I'm going to go like this, and then I can tell that that's when I need to cut it back in. So we are back with the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable. I've got my guests Donn Bixel and Pat Fahey. What's up, Pat?
Yes.
You're drinking your Trumer now. I see.
My celebration is gone. I've switched to Truman.
Nice.
And Donn, what are you drinking now?
I am still on Softly Spoken Magic Spells.
Got it. From Single Cut, I see.
Single cut. It's really
Cool.
good. It's really
Cool.
good.
I brought it over. I don't know if I'll get to it, but the 28 Haze later from Beechwood Brewing.
What a name.
Yeah. So we'll see. I mean, you got it. Puns. You know, that's what it's all about.
Where's Beechwood Brewing from? Where are they?
Long
They're LA.
Beach. Yeah. Mhm.
Nice.
So we were just getting into it before I killed all the momentum. I think you were talking, Donn, about how you thought maybe that some of the things that are going on right now in the long run might be good for beer. I would like to hear a little bit from you guys about where you think things are going to be. I said a year from now, I think, in the outline, but we'll be, we can have some leeway with that. But, beyond next spring and stuff like that you were talking about, we'll see how the numbers are looking in the spring. But where do you think we're going to be a year from now, maybe even 2 years from now? I'll leave it very open-ended, and then we can kind of talk about where we're going, but I don't even need to be specific about on or off. You can talk about different sizes of breweries. What are things going to look like? I think everybody knows that there are going to be long-term, well, I would assume it's not just going to go back to being exactly like what it was, March 15th. 2020. It's not just going to be like that, like the day before, the earth stood still type thing. Where do you see any predictions or anything that you think may happen or are afraid may happen or are hopeful may happen for anyone out there?
Let Donn go.
Okay.
Pat, I'm going to let you go, actually.
Okay.
Come on, I ended it. I'd love to hear what I really do. I'd love to hear what you think.
I mean, Donn, you spend a lot of time looking at numbers. Your opinion is a lot more informed than mine is. Mine is kind of just more like what I think generally.
That's perfect. That's what this show's about.
Hey, Pat, those people that know me know that 99.9% of what I say is what I think.
That's a number. I mean, I do know that about you. I know that, but see, the thing is you look at a lot of numbers. So even what you think is informed at least, whereas I'm just kind of like, yeah, I feel like it's like this, and I look at numbers now and then when I have access to them. I want to say, so I'll start by saying something. I think I saw this somewhere, somebody talking about when the restaurant industry would recover, and obviously it's not exactly the same as when the beer industry is going to get back to kind of being normal, but one of the projections I saw was that it would probably be about 5 years before like
that's what I saw.
Dining scene got back to similar strength.
Pat,
We're going to
where
see.
where did you guys read that? What was that?
Do not recall. No recollection at all. Probably totally made up by some other joker. So,
no, I saw 2025, but I don't know. It was probably like the New York Times or something.
Yeah, interesting. I'm just taking notes. I mean, it's a staggering number to say.
Yeah, I heard 2025 is the year I heard.
It is staggering if you actually think about it, but truly, it does not surprise me. I mean, it is the restaurant industry in particular has been hit so hard by this. And, we've already seen a lot of places close. We're going to see a lot more places close, I think, this winter.
There are a lot of places that are closed that nobody knows about, too.
Yeah,
I would just
that's
put
a
that
good
out
point.
there. There are places that I know for a fact that I am not going to say that I know are closed.
Chris,
and I'm sure we do, too.
And that name that I will not drop from earlier today, very interesting you said that, because that was the first time today that I had heard of a place being closed that didn't make the news, and they did it on purpose because of the fact that they didn't want it to make the news. They just wanted to be quiet. They didn't want to have the pressure be on their employees. And so to hear that come out now twice in one day, that's really scary to me, because the fact that you think you know all these things and you've heard it because we're all connected to the same people. But there's an underbelly of this thing of a number of places that are already closed that people don't realize. They just think it's COVID shutdown. They don't realize that they're not coming back. Sorry, Pat, to interrupt. Sorry about that.
No, but I think that gives a window into, I think, what the on-premise is going to look like. I would imagine that bars are probably suffering similar fates, where you are going to see a lot of bars go under during this time period. And I think that bars will come back because people like to drink in social settings. I mean, I don't think that is going to go away. I do think that there are going to be things about this time that have. The other thing that I think is going to be a carryover is this period of time has fundamentally changed people's behavior. Yeah. People are a lot more used to takeout and doing things in a home setting. There are people who are fresh out of college, who their first experience as adults, who could go to bars or go out to eat, has been in a setting where they're mostly doing takeout. Those behaviors are getting ingrained in people right now. And it is going to take some time for people to get back into the habit of going out, I think. I think that there's going to be, if and when there is a vaccine and things, there's the opportunity for things to go back to normal a little bit more. I think there's going to be a glut of people that all go out right then. But I think it's going to be kind of like the beginning of COVID, where everybody was like, we're all home all the time. It's basically just everybody's drunk all the time. I know I've talked to a lot of people who were like, yeah, the first month I just was just drinking all the time. And you can't.
Because you can, right?
You can. And I think that it will be similar when things open back up. There will be a period where people are just out. And then I think that people will probably fall back into the patterns that they've established during this time. And it will take years of the on-premise being an option for people's behavior to shift back to going to that regularly.
Now, let's not even, it's funny. I was going two places mentally with this. One, I was like, do you think it'll be something that will be, you said it's starting to get ingrained. I don't think it's going to be ingrained the Great Depression was ingrained into people forever. 2 generations prior to us, there's those our grandparents are still like that. They are forever more miserly than other people. I don't think we've had a long enough time for that to get ingrained. But also, I think there's going to be, I don't want to call it a Great Depression, but there's going to be some serious economic fallout.
Absolutely.
We just talked about some of it. Businesses going under, people couldn't make the money means that their employees aren't employed. And I mean, that's not just in the restaurant industry. I mean, look at all sorts of entertainment. I mean, McCormick Place is the largest. I was just hearing this morning on the radio. It's the largest convention center in North America, and it's essentially mothballed right now. So it's there's going to be huge economic implications that, just getting the engine started again is going to be difficult. And when it does get started, who knows what that's going to look like,
Well, and I will say one more thing, and then I do want to turn it over to Donn, because like I said, I think he has probably more informed things to say about it. But I recall having a conversation with a friend of mine who I'm not going to name drop. He works for a very large restaurant chain. It's just very important, but it doesn't matter.
McDonald's. This guy
He
is the head of
Chris, not the way I thought you were going with this. I thought it was like Boca Restaurant Group. That's the way this was going. Like
Ronald. So no, but I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and one of the things that he pointed out, and I do think that this will be a fundamental shift that will last, is that we already were heading in the direction of more virtual ordering, whether that's ordering through online retailers of alcohol, or whether that's, doing takeout and delivery type food. We already were moving in the direction of that, where more and more people were starting to do that. This period forced the entire industry to rapidly shift into that. I think that was a natural shift that was already happening. I don't think that we're going to see a huge shift back from that. I think that people are going, the thing is I think that we already were going to see this shift into more and more online stuff. And so I do think that when the on-premise comes back, it's going to come back in a different way. And I think this is something that I've been saying for a lot of time. This is something Avery and I talk about a lot, but like hospitality is so important. Like when in the on-premise, and I would even say in the off-premise for a store like yours, Chris, the experience is so important. The experience that you can give people is what makes it different than just firing up your browser and ordering from somebody like Drizzly. And same thing with a hospitality experience where you're going somewhere to get food or get beverage served to you in an environment, in a curated way. I think that the future of the on-premise hospitality and creating an experience for people is going to become even more important, because you need to outweigh the convenience of just being able to order whatever you want at home. You need to create enough of an experience for people that it gets them to be like, yeah, I'm going to go and I'm going to spend more money and take more effort to get out of my home to go and have that experience. So
it's interesting. Yeah. I mean, I'm in some ways I'm hopeful. One, I think I mentioned this on the show before, but one thing that I saw just from the online orders for our shop side of the business was when the lockdown first started, we were doing maybe 1/3 delivery, 2/3 pickup. Maybe it was something like that, or maybe it was 60/40. Yeah. Now it's like 10/90. Which way do you think it is, Donn? Do you think it's now 10/90?
Yeah, it's 10 pickup, 90 delivery. Really?
Nope. Other way around.
I'm
that's shocking.
Other way around.
Because I've been in there, and I almost feel like I want to get in it, and it's not me. You know me. I will sit and talk to your employees all day long. I just feel like respecting them. I kind of go in. I'm like, do you have this? No. Do you have this? No. Do you have this? Oh, thank, boom, zip, out. But I've been in less frequently. I mean, I definitely have. So for myself, I've limited my times going in. So I'm very surprised to hear that.
Yeah. Yeah, I was too. Honestly.
I'm shocked.
Yeah, no, but it was something that I paid attention to. I was like, and it's the same people. They've now switched to, I'll come and get it.
Yeah,
I think maybe because they, it could be a million reasons. It could be a million reasons. It's like, I need to get out of the damn house.
They miss that social interaction. Right?
And I do think that that's part of it. I think too, and I sort of alluded to this. The experience is super important in the on-premise. Chris, your store is extremely unique in that you provide a curated experience to customers as an off-premise venue, in that it is a very, like, I've watched your people interact with people where they're like, hey, you shop here regularly. I kind of know what your tastes are. Like, I remember being at the store when I was shooting pictures of a billion different beer styles.
Beer, yeah.
For
beer
8 hours. For 8 hours.
For 8 hours. That was for an e-learning course that we've been putting together with
Don, we're not exaggerating. It was
e-learning. There was a lot of e-learning going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can maybe talk about that at some point. But yeah, I got there at like 10 and I left at like 7 p.m. But like, I remember hearing Ryan talking to somebody and being like, hey man, like, you might, like, he talked to him a little bit about what he would like. And the guy was like, well, what about this thing? He's like, that thing's kind of weird. Like, I don't know your palate, cause like, I'm like, we haven't interacted a lot. So I would maybe steer, like, that sort of experience is, 0.001% of the off premise. So, I would imagine that for your standard, like, Binny's shoppers, or like, I would imagine that more of them are shifting to an online ordering. And I could be wrong about that, but I would say, and Donn could probably back this up or refute it, like, the data probably backs that up. I know online ordering places have been doing well during this time.
Well, explosive. I mean, Pat, listen, I'm so very thankful that you went first, because the fact that you touched, you touched on things that I would have forgotten to touch on. I mean, you nailed it as far as the consumer experience changing. God, we could spend hours on this. I mean, and be
totally wrong.
No, but Pat, you're dead on. I mean, listen, it was going in this direction. Like, we all see in any industry that we're in, the small, minute changes that are happening over periods of time. And I think the interesting thing, having this conversation tonight of all nights, being into a transition for me as far as my career, is that a year went by like that. So time goes by, as we all know, so fast, but this year faster than others, because these small changes that happen in every industry this year happened in 1 year. In 1 year, things that we thought were going to take 10 years to happen, the not the popping of the craft bubble, but the letting the air out a little bit of the excitement, just boom, it just happens so fast. And the consumer change and the consumer feeling comfortable. I mean, the younger demographic already felt comfortable with ordering online and getting their groceries delivered. But watching my parents order online was fascinating. And they're better at it now than I am, because I still don't do it. I mean, we don't do it because we have our cycle of where the places we shop. So there's certain things we get online. Groceries, we're very fortunate. We live in Chicago, very close to some places. So we still have the same thing. But what I worry about the most, and the only thing I really want to talk about here is this. I had a conversation right before this happened with a very large data company that purchased another very large deliverable company of data. And one of the smartest people I've ever met. I mean, I was so blown away by this individual because of his forward thinking. While a lot of us think in small incremental steps, he was thinking 10 years out and how, because of everything happening, it was going to happen like this. But he talked about the largest retailer in the world, that sits in Bentonville, Arkansas. And he talked about how they were transforming their entire way that they put things on the shelves. and everything was going to be data driven. Everything. That there was going to be no more salespeople walking into their places and knocking on the door and getting their 15 minutes in Bentonville and being able to present their products. Everything was going to be determined by data, by zip code, what was going on those shelves. And my first fear was, what happens to all that experiential, opportunities that you have in a places, especially, I feel like there's a little bit of a plug, Chris, for you and your establishment is, like, I think about Sam's Wine and Spirits the way it used to be before it was Binny's. And that's no slam on Binny's. It's just back then.
Sam's was just a magical place.
My God, you'd walk in. That entire thing you were talking about, Pat, about talking about beer that I have when I go to the beer temple was like, and some of those people are still there at Binny's, was like, hey, Donn, great to see you. And you'd be like, whoa, he remembers me. I'm like, I only bought wine from him like 3 times. And he'd be like, no, you don't want that. He's like, that's like $28. He goes, buy 3 of these. In fact, buy one of those. They were like $12 each. He goes, spend $12 more, get 3 bottles instead of 1 bottle for $28. I'd be like, boom, mind blown. If we're moving at rapid speed as we are right now, I can't believe I almost said warp speed. As we're moving at this rapid pace of change, I really do worry about, as you alluded to, one of you did, that next generation getting used to the experience of going to bars and going out and shopping and learning. Everything's going to just be thrown at them. It's just going to be so fast that my wife and I were looking online to buy a fire pit today, and I was laughing because as soon as we looked at it, I flipped to Facebook to show her, and the 3rd ad was for the fire pit. And I jokingly said, hey, let's look. I told her, Alan Edmonds shoes have been on sale. I Googled Alan Edmonds, pulled it up, boom, 4th ad on Facebook then, Alan Edmonds. I think so many of the buying decisions, because of what has changed, are going to change into decisions that aren't necessarily made by the consumer anymore, that are just going to be made for them.
The illusion of choice. And
that's what scares the crap out of me, is the fact that these next resets. So let me talk a little bit about what's going to happen. What's going to happen is these next resets that are happening in spring. So for those of you that are on that don't know what a reset is or understand it, there's 2 major resets that happen in the United States in the bev alc business and in most industries. Major resets are done in the spring and in the fall. Because of COVID, the reset of the store shelves, replacing items that weren't selling with items that do sell, or new items that suppliers wanted to get on the shelves, didn't fully get they weren't fully actionable or changed over because of COVID. So they didn't do them. They suspended them. So the stuff that was supposed to come off the shelves in spring of 2019 sat there. And then came fall, there was a little bit of pull and plug, which means that you agree to pull your product, your same product out, and replace it with one of your own. Some of that happened. This spring reset is going to be the greatest reset of the bev alc industry in my lifetime, because we've gone almost a full year before a full reset has happened. So it scares me a lot, is a lot of these breweries that are just holding on right now, that think they're doing fine, when these resets come down and they find out that these placements in chain stores across the United States are gone because they were in a 4-pack for $19.99 as opposed to being in a 12-pack right now for $15.99, which is the pack size that is selling right now and blowing up across the United States, and they lose their shelf position before it, and suddenly their route to market with some of the independents isn't there anymore. That's what scares me.
The route to market with the independents isn't there. Why? Why is it there?
It's not there because of the fact that they're not doing the volume. They haven't adjusted and changed. Okay. A lot of them have gone out of business.
Yeah.
And a lot of them didn't adjust like you did from a model of in-person to delivery. And now, very surprisingly, that they all came back. But a lot of them just aren't going to have a place anymore because they can't sell it in their own premise. They're not going to have a place to sell this product. They can't make a 30-barrel batch of beer and keep 15 barrels for themselves and sell that on draft at their own premise and make a lot of money off of it and sell some draft out in the on premise. My fear is the fact that it's going to get so much worse, and it's going to happen. A lot of people don't see it coming. I mean, this switch, as Pat alluded to, isn't going to switch back overnight, because we're not going to go flood the bars like we used to. Some people will. They will. But I know myself, I mean, I've still have gone to the bars throughout this outside with my small group of friends. I don't think I'm going to be very quick to rush into a music venue and be there with like 1,000 people. I think it's going to take time. And as Pat alluded to, you know, the way that I drink now and the way that I enjoy myself, I think it's going to take a long time for that to switch back. But my biggest fear in all this is the fact that enough breweries weren't able to switch to pack sizes that are now selling. And a lot of them have had those shelf positions for longer than they deserve them. And I think that when the shelf sets come out in the spring, it's going to get a lot worse.
And the big boys are going to flex their muscles too.
Yeah, they're flexing them right now, because the only thing that these retailers care about is how do you sell the product for me? And it's either discounting, advertising, all the traditional things that people do when all the little guys are still thinking about sampling tables and touching one consumer at a time.
Yeah, it's kind of the illusion, in my opinion, of the infallibility of data, which is, you know, it can do a lot. But I'll say one thing, that Rot House on the data would have never happened. I mean, it just wouldn't have become a thing. I don't want to toot my own horn, but I don't think it's a stretch to say that it's probably in Whole Foods now, in some degree, because of the sales that we did in the beer temple, because we were selling 95% of it. That's why I'm saying it. I know how much came in and I know how much we moved, and we moved it because we got a sample of it. Somebody came in, gave us their 15 minutes, you know, like you were saying, it isn't going to happen anymore, Don. And I never
at that one place.
Right. We drank it and we were like, this beer is pretty good. And I was expecting it to be one of those just small breweries that the big guy or whatever reason that one of the big guys brings in, they're out of touch. It was a favor to bring in this beer, and it's totally beat up by the time it gets here. I was totally wrong. It tasted very, very good. We had a very well-respected, to use the parlance of some of our guests, very well-known, very famous Pilsner on draft at the time from Germany. Really old brewery, real old brewery, one of the oldest, and some say the oldest. And we had it, and it blew the doors off that Pilsner that we had on draft. And we started to evangelize this beer, and it worked. And I'm glad that it's now in Whole Foods and other places. But they were bringing this beer in 5 cases at a time. Lakeshore, the Budweiser distributor, was bringing Rot House in 5 cases. You know, like you're not going to really realistically get into Whole Foods. You might get into one of them. But it's that stuff can happen if it's just all data driven. It can happen now that it's already in there, but a new one can happen without that little those touches, those, you know, to some degree it's not the touching one person at a time with the sample table on an end cap in a grocery store, Don, but it's somebody going around and giving you a sample of beer and saying, hey, what do you think of this? So
I just pulled the numbers up, and it's really interesting to see. It's, what were you selling it for, a 6-pack?
$14.99, I think.
So nationwide, it averages $14.49 a unit price. And what percentage do you think it's up this year?
100%.
So it's up 29%.
Okay.
in the United States as far as what's scanning, and what's scanning is just infinitesimal. And what's interesting is when you look at this and you look at the equivs, I'm only showing for the last 26 weeks in the United States 1,500 cases of sales in the last 26 weeks. So the interesting thing, and it's such a great story to talk about this brand, because the fact that if you think about this brand alone, think about in the last 26 weeks. So if you go back and you think about the amount of months that you've been selling this beer, it's not capturing any of this data. So you put your data into something like this. Mm-hmm. And this is capturing Vinny's data that's in here as well. But their numbers are at least double, triple, quadruple this. But the story is only telling up 29%. So when you're talking about the largest retailer in the world, they're never putting this brand in because of the fact that so much of their data off of this incredible sales story isn't ever going to be told to anybody outside of a small amount of people like us in the beer community.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's crazy. I mean, 1,500 cases in 6 months.
Yeah, that's it. And you know what? If as we're talking, I'll pull up the entire last year of all that's being sold. And this is total US data that I'm looking at right now too. So I'll try to pull up really quick for us the amount.
That's crazy. I mean, I know we've sold several hundred cases, I would guess. Isn't that funny?
Yeah, isn't that amazing how little, and it goes back to the earlier conversation that we had. Such a small amount of this stuff is actually captured, especially when you talk about brands like this. I mean, this is a great example of how the data can lie a little bit and not tell the true story, but the major retailers will always lean towards this data. And it's going to make it harder and harder for anybody to break into any kind of retail establishment.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
They won't have a chance. So it's like without this data.
But the thing is, the retailers don't care about that. They don't need someone. In fact, it's easier if somebody doesn't break in. What they don't want is for somebody to break in that they're not hip to. That's what they're worried about. But if they control the set. So I remember when I first started this show where, I was super pessimistic and I said, well, what Big Beer wants to do is just give you the illusion of choice, acquire enough of a set to make it look like you don't need to go to the independent for your IPA. We have IPA. You like sours? We have sours. You like Belgians? We have Belgians. And here. And then just have a small set that they can control and just take all of this and shrink it down to this. And I think that's what the big retailers want. I mean, if you go to Target, there aren't really any Walmarts around me to go to, but if you go to Target, I think there is a lot of illusion of choice at Target. A lot of people love Target, and I've, again, I got yelled at on this show before for saying, like, I don't like Target.
I hate Target. I hate it. Hate it. I have to always preface this, and my wife and kids make fun of me because they love it. They think it's the greatest thing in the world. The best stock choice I ever made in my entire life outside of Apple was Target, and it was only because my sister worked there. Bought it 10 years. It's been very, very good to me. I hate that friggin' store.
Fine. I'm talking about from shopping.
As a Minnesota person, I have to say I like Target, but
that's fine.
Well, of course,
that's fine.
And that's where my sister lives, Pat. So she, of course, worked for Target.
Yeah. So I was just looking. So we're just roughly talking. We've sold we're saying definitely over 500 cases in our store in the last 26 weeks of Broadhouse.
And all that's captured. I just pulled it up. All that's captured in the entire United States going back for 52 weeks is 2,700 cases in the United States.
That's great. We sold probably 500 at least. So that's funny. But getting back to Target, like the thing is, I needed to get a funnel, and I wanted to buy one of those Russian doll sets of funnels where they're just all like nested within one another. Yeah.
Were these for beer bongs?
Exactly. But I wanted to do it for me
of multiple sizes.
And for my wife and for my children. So I needed different size funnels.
That makes sense. Sense.
But they have a funnel there. They have one. They have an OXO Good Grips funnel. That's it. And that is the Target thing. You want something? We have one of them. And it's it's
Oh, that's fantastic.
I just don't like I don't like that model. And here's the thing is they just want to control the set. They don't care about, because then they can dictate when something hot and trendy comes out, because then what they can do is make a deal on the back end, say, okay, cool. What's going to be big next summer is this. We're going to plan it out a year in advance. We're going to have it all, like the manufacturing ready, bring it all in, get all our big push going, and bang, we're going to push it. Hey, what do you know? This is the hot new product that we made, the hot new product. That's how they want to do it. They don't want it to be an organic thing based on user or shopper's choice, because they don't have the control then. So I think that we're fighting against what's easiest for these big companies to do. But it requires people to go in and look around and shop and try things and talk to people and be human, and not just based on, not robotic. And there is a big place for data. I mean, to look at it and try to figure out where things are going. It's another thing to just hand yourself over to the data and just have your whole kind of life run by it. Geez.
Yeah, Pat, I've got some really bad stories for you, Chris, because the fact that, everybody is doing it, whether or not they think they're doing it or not. I mean, you just nailed it with the conversation about Target, because, the hardest thing about it is the fact that the rush to data right now is crazy. I mean, every company in the United States that didn't purchase it, and before they didn't need it, and maybe they still don't need as much of it as they think they do, is rushing into it because they realize that that's how all the buying decisions are suddenly being made. And
it's gaming algorithms. That's what everyone's trying to do now, whether it's on Facebook to get my page more likes, or whether it's to get on a set. Sorry to interrupt. Go on.
No, but I mean, you're perfect. I mean, you nailed it before when you talked about the amount of draft handles you had and what you went down to. I mean, the lack of consumer choice is accelerating. And the amount of things that you see in your feed when you go into Drizzly or any of these other sites, it's all still controlled. You know what I mean? It's all bought and paid for. The first things you see, I mean, and I'm not going to name too many retailers because I don't want to get myself in trouble with our friends, but all those spots, the things you see and how they're listed is dependent upon, are you giving them scan dollars? Are you paying for advertising on their sites? There's a reason why that IPA is number one in every site you go to. There's a reason why after you click on it, whether you buy it or not, it's going to show up in your Facebook feed and your Instagram feed. I mean, that acceleration of everything, and Pat nailed this, it's just accelerated everything that was happening anyway, has just happened like that.
And that's
the thing that's incredible.
Honestly, I think that's a whole can of worms that I think we have. I'm not going to say we've danced around it, but I think that is something that's probably too much to get into. Is when as we see more and more people shift to buying alcohol in an online environment where you're able to, it's a very different experience looking at a laid out page as it is looking at a laid out cooler. Because the thing is when somebody looks at a laid out page, especially if they're just trying to grab something quick, you might only see the first 3 or 4 things that are on the page. Like that, as consumer behavior moves more towards purchasing alcohol in that environment, how do you hand sell some of these products that really need somebody talking about them in order for the customer to understand them in an environment where it's all done on, it's an online humanless transaction?
I mean, where my mind is going already is they can get you on places like, Instacart or Walmart.com or whatever, where those big players may not even want you to get to the beer page. They may not even want you to get that far. What they'll do is, okay, what's everyone buying right now? Oh, they're buying spaghetti. Perfect. When someone buys spaghetti, I want my thing say, lots of people also enjoy adding my 6-pack of beer. So it's like, oh yeah, I was going to get a 6-pack anyway. I've heard of that one. Bing, I get it. Now I don't even have to go to the beer page of the site anymore. There you go. We made it to the banquet. Congratulations.
Made it to the banquet.
And then that's a huge win for them, because then you're not even shopping for beer. You're just going with like, here, take this. You're just doing what's been fed to you.
Yeah, well, Chris,
illusion of choice. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm gonna make this number up. I read it a long time ago, and I quote it all the time, and I always.
I know this many famous people.
No. But besides that, and there's a lot of them actually, and like 2 of them actually know who I am. But the interesting thing is, I forgot the amount of turns once you get something into a basket. So once you put it into your online basket, I don't remember it, and I want to say it's like 3 or 4 turns before anybody removes it, notices it. Once you put these things on auto order and they just start coming, and so the amount of money that these big companies spend to get you to put these items in their baskets, whether it's Target or Walmart or Drizzly or whatever, that's the key. That's where they spend all their money, is to make sure that you put it in the basket, and then they reinforce that with messaging to you through your social media. That's the key. And the hard thing is, let's talk about the Hop Butcher again, which is just the greatest breakout story that I've watched over the last 5 years, or I know they've been around longer, but it's amazing to watch what they've done. But they haven't even touched that avenue, and they may never need to, which is incredible to watch, because they've got so much opportunity to blow up. And you watch Maplewood and what they're doing as well. But you look at brands like that, the consumer that shops at Target, they're never going to see them or know them ever. And so the hard thing for them becomes this. Let's say that all of a sudden they decide to break out. They decide they want to be in Jewel, they want to be in Drizzly, they want to be in these platforms. The consumer doesn't know them. And the cost for them to get known is going to be well beyond what anybody can afford to get to that point. That's the hardest thing about this, is that the fact that the big breweries that have grown up during this era that was just passed, it's going to be so very difficult for anybody to get past a certain level, because the big guys and their dollars and the control of what's just happened isn't going to allow anybody the cost to get in and play in that game and to stay in it. It's just not going to be approachable.
And what do you know? There's no little places to go and do it yourself anymore. Because
Well, I think we're going to a place where there are 2 very clearly segmented portions of the market with like a huge chasm in between them, where you have larger brewers and you have artisanal.
And that chasm is huge, Pat.
And it's only going to get bigger.
And the scary thing is, let's just say that it's a $300 billion market, or whatever it is, and you've got 10 billion is over in this chasm, 290 billion is over in this chasm. That's the problem with the chasm, is the fact that the chasm is getting wider, Pat. That's what scares the hell out of me, is the fact that
I don't want to go
market an opportunity to get into those places. This is shrinking. This is growing exponentially and only being filled by a few players, or players that hold all the other players. Heineken holding all the players in that card, or Budweiser holding all the players in that card.
Now, I have said for a long time, and COVID has changed this a little bit, but I have always thought that there is space for the small brewer that does not have designs of getting to be really big, that services their community, that primarily operates through an on-premise model. I think anybody that's in that model is hurting like hell right now. But I do think that 3, 4, 5 years from now, I do think that probably will still be a viable model. It will not be I think that the barriers are extremely high. If you wanted to, like, anybody out there who wants to like start a brewery and become a national brand.
Yeah, they're crazy. It's not going to happen.
Let
me take that back.
It could happen, but I would be shocked.
Listen, we're always wrong, because there's always some breakout that we're always like, there's always one.
There's always a Rheingeist. There's always a Rheingeist, but like there are not many of them.
Yeah,
No.
but Rheingeist isn't going to be national. So I mean,
Probably not.
they're not, and nor can they be. And that's nothing against. Oh my God,
The one that I would
almost
point
did
to
it, by the
recently.
way. I almost name dropped it.
Oh
Ugh.
boy.
Almost gotcha.
But even they can't do it because of the fact that there's these breweries like Rheingeist, they just don't play because of what you're saying, Pat, is that this acceleration of local that has continued to grow and will come back strong prevents anybody else from being able to spread too far.
One of the most recent I can think of and point to is Founders.
Yep.
Founders is one of the few brands I can think of that, you know, I don't know how old they are, but 10 years ago they were a craft darling, and they are a national. I don't know if they're in 50 states, but they are a large player.
They're close.
Yeah, but they
have
have huge international money. That doesn't count.
They
out doesn't count.
But I would say that they were on that trajectory before that happened.
But
I would say
there
was also a different
they,
time.
But,
there was also
God,
a different
this is
time.
an interesting conversation, because were they on that trajectory naturally, or were they on that trajectory because they had to hit a certain number to be able to get bought out? You know,
Right.
That is a question.
That's the hardest thing. You know,
that's a question that almost I don't know that can be answered by any. But
well, we'll never know, because the only people know who could say cannot be named in this episode, and there's only one person who knows them all, and so it's kind of catch-22. That those who shall not be named know. But it's a very good point, Don, that you're making. It's very interesting, and I think you could easily be right. I mean, who knows?
Well, but that's what happened to a couple of these people, is the fact that the race across the United States happened for a couple of these breweries because there was dollars involved. If they hit a certain threshold, that then triggered the buy out of your arrangement or have them buy fully into your arrangement.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is not secret information. I mean, this is what happened. And that's why so many of these actually pushed so hard and so aggressively. I mean, massive marketing campaigns happen for brands that I used to work for, you know what I mean? And, you know, they pushed so hard because they had a small equity stake that was bought for them from an outside company. And then they sold to Samuel Adams, and they pushed so hard. And there's always these triggers that happen with these PE deals. That's the hardest thing about private equity. It's fantastic, but there can be these pressures on them for them to race across the country. And
that's what Tony McGee, I'll name drop. That's what Tony McGee mentioned when he was on the show, kind of in his little essay or manifesto about the zombie breweries. You know, these kind of zombie breweries that are out there. They're already kind of dead. They're already kind of cannibalizing other people because they're on a timeline. I mean, they have the money, but now they have to. I mean, they're on a time. I mean,
hey, listen, you want to be Tony McGee? Listen, I know nothing about that deal. Let me put that out there. I know nothing about that deal, but I will just say this: would you rather be Tony McGee and make? Sorry, not Tony McGee. Would you rather be Lagunitas and make $500 million, or know if you hit a certain number by a certain timeline that triggers something for the other $500 million? Well, I will go sell a ton of beer to get that other $500 million. And that's why, Pat, there will be others, but they're going to be few and far between.
What do you think, quickly, we're running out of time, Don, about the Sweetwater deal being bought for $350 million by the Canadian cannabis interest, especially in the wake of the $41 million Ballast Point sale to Kings and Convicts?
I will tell you this: there is a portion of this industry that I understand, and there's a portion I don't. And one of them is name rights and what those name rights are worth. And if I'm a brewer in the United States that has based myself on the name 420, and I have got an alcohol deliverable with a name 420, and my entire basis is around the genre of a certain product that another certain company may produce, and alcohol and marijuana laws are changing in the United States, would an overpaying for a brewery that probably isn't growing the way it used to be make sense for name rights and distribution of said product? I think it was an amazing deal. I think it was an amazing deal for both parties because of the fact that it's incredible that you've got a brand that's known for 420 bought for a company that is known for 420. So I think there'll be a lot more of those. Betting on, what happens next, I think at some point in time there will be a deliverable for marijuana in this country. And I think that they are now at the forefront of being able to deliver that. I think it was amazing. I think it was an incredible deal. And I think they actually got it for a value, and they probably got it for a great price.
Okay, then. $350, $350 million of value.
I have a similar feeling about that deal in that, what they are betting on is they're betting on federal legalization of marijuana.
You betcha.
Sure, but you need to go on.
And if and when that comes to fruition, they now have a quick route to market on a marijuana beverage products and probably other avenues
Quickly
as well.
Scaling up, having the distribution relationship.
Sweetwater's with some of the best distributors in the United States.
Right.
I mean, they're not with the rinky-dink distributors. They're with the biggest of the bigs. You're talking about the Reyes's of the world, the Sheehan's of the world. I mean, the biggest distributors in the United States. These guys have got a route to market that appeases their partners that want to be in this business. I mean, and I won't speak obviously to the Reyes's or the Sheehan's, and maybe they don't want to be in that business, but I can definitely tell you that there's a lot of
They like making money.
There's a lot of distributors in this country that want to be in the delivering or distribution of those products. I think it was a fantastic move. I was so impressed when this deal went down because I think it was. I don't think it was an overspend if the winds keep going in this direction.
I agree with your point too, that I think it was a really good deal for both companies.
Yeah.
In that, if somebody was buying Sweetwater purely on their strength as a beer company, that would not have been the price.
A quarter of it. I mean, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know their insides and outs. None of us do. But, if you look at their volume and where they're at and what their trends are, I mean, they got premium dollars for a great brand with great branding. I think it's, God, I can't believe I'm going to say it. I think it's a win-win for both of them. I mean, it really is.
Cool.
Time will tell.
Yeah, what's up?
I said time will tell.
Time will tell. We are out of time.
Speaking of time.
But I wanted to see if any of you guys wanted to say anything before we left. Anything either of you would like to say as kind of a...
I'm going to go first because Pat's more eloquent than I am. At the bottom of my cap, and I don't know if this will go well.
Let me see if I can. There you go.
Can you see
That's
that?
good.
Yeah, that's very good. Let me see.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
So for those of you that can't see this is a hard day's work deserves a beer. So I will just end on that note, and I will thank you, Chris, for bringing me and Pat together again. It's good to see you, my friend.
It's good to see you too, Don.
And I will leave the last word for Mr. Fahey.
Don we keep trying to have beers together, and then there's been like COVID, and I was trying to write a book, and so this is as close to having beers together as I feel like you can almost get these days. So I'm glad that this happened. It was lovely. I don't have a lot eloquent to say. I will say one of the things that I would have touched on in the what's going on section of my life with Cicerone, the reason that I was at your store for as long as I was is we've been starting to do a bunch of work towards putting together more consumer focused e-learning courses. So we have something that's going to launch there shortly, which I hope is really exciting for people. One of the reasons Cicerone was born was because people who were like hardcore beer consumers at that point in time knew more than the people that were serving the beer. I think we're back to a place where there are a lot more people in the fold of enjoying beer, and some amount of consumer education, just helping consumers understand a little bit more about the complex landscape that's out there, is a really positive thing. And it's a thing that we're hoping to do a little bit of. So I'm hoping that people really like what we're about to release into the world.
Okay.
With our, our erotica that was taken on the Beer Temple bar. So,
oh yeah, trust me, guys, you are gonna want to see this. Thank you, guys. Thanks to my guests, Misters Pat Fahey and Donn Bixel. It's been awesome. Thank you, guys. We'll have to do this again. Thanks so much to everyone listening. And that's about it. I'm going to see if I can get this music coming back on. Let's see. Can I do it? All right. If so,
can we jam?
Yeah, we can jam. That's all for the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable. So long.
Remember, this is what we wanted. Remember, this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again, 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 again. Remember, this is what we wanted. Remember, this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again, 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 again. Remember, this is what we